Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Robert Lyon. I'm your host, your favorite business coach. And today we have the great opportunity to talk to the myth, the legend, Sir John, man. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast and just happy to have you be here. So why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and kind of tell everybody who you are and a little bit about what you're up to.
I don't consider myself a legend, but
I think it's pretty cool,
those are your words, not mine. But thank you for that. I do have a lot of experience, so I'd like to think that while I may not be a legend, I do have some wisdom to share with the audience. But I'm going to introduce myself the same way I introduced myself a few years ago when I found myself in an elevator with a woman who headed up a major New York PR company. And she had just given a presentation that I had the opportunity to hear, and I was very impressed with what she shared. And I just found myself, stroke of luck, in an elevator with her and complimented her on her talk, to which she replied, "Well, thank you very much. Who are you and what do you do?" And my reply to her was, "I help companies get their prospects and customers excited." And she just kind of gave me a look, at which point I immediately handed her my business card, which had a visual of a pair of really excited looking, crazy eyes on it. And on the back of it, it said, "If you want your prospects excited about your product, you better get them excited about your marketing." And she read that. She took a second to read that. She looked at me again and she said, "I think this is the first time I've ever met someone in an elevator who introduced me by making a claim about themselves and then immediately backing up that claim by their business card." Mm-hmm. She said, "Okay, so congratulations. You've got me excited. I'd like to hear more about what you do. But I've got to get back to my office. How about we have lunch in a week or so? Here's my business card. I'd like to continue this conversation." And at that lunch, Robert, after chatting with her for about an hour, she said, "I think you could really help me out with one of my clients. I'd like to give you a contract for a 3-month project that we can pay you $93,000. Are you interested?" I said, "Sounds good to me." I signed the contract, and of that $93,000 for the 3-month project, I cleared $88,000.
Your life is very interesting to me because you kind of came up in a time where marketing was different, right? I'm in the new age where everything is like, let's shake our butts for the TikTok algorithm, make all these videos and do all the crazy stuff. So just so I'm correct, was kind of like your main thing the creative side, so like graphic design and things like that? Was that your bread and butter and then videos, or what was it?
So yeah, you're right. So I've been doing this quite a while, and some things with marketing have changed a lot because of the media landscape has certainly changed, and with that there have been a lot of changes. But in many ways, Robert, things have not changed at all. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's still about how well you communicate what your benefit is to your prospect in a way that gets them excited enough to actually want to learn more or, pay you money. Right.
Right.
So that will never change. It's just a matter of now what tools you use to make that happen. So to answer your question, yeah, I started out on the creative side. I went to one of the top schools in the country, Syracuse University, for advertising at one of the top programs in the country. And even though I started out on the graphic design side, I always was very good at the writing side as well.
Cool.
Some artistic people are not good with that. I happen to be very good at both. And I think that's one big reason why I had the success that I did, because I was really good at both. So started my career in New York, working for some of the top agencies in the country on brands like Coke and Pizza Hut and Volkswagen.
Wow.
And it was a great training ground for learning about not just advertising, but marketing and strategic thinking and certainly breakthrough creative work. So that was a great foundation, and then started my own agency with that foundation and had a very different experience, because instead of working with clients like Coke and Pizza Hut, I was working with much smaller companies. So I was dealing with oftentimes the president of the company, that had sometimes a B2B business, certainly much smaller companies. and got to see, I should say, a whole different perspective of advertising and marketing, because I was dealing with companies that had limited budgets. Unlike Coke and Pizza Hut, these guys were very concerned about every dollar that they spent. So that took a very different approach, how they could best use their advertising and marketing dollars. And in many cases, it wasn't about advertising; it was about marketing. And marketing includes things like, how do you create a buzz? As it didn't always involve paid media. It was, how do I get people talking? How do I get PR? What can I do that can, get some press? Things like that. Guerrilla marketing back then. It was things about guerrilla marketing. And, that was in the late 90s, Robert. And it was around that time where digital media then became a new thing. Mm-hmm. And it was about, well, okay, how is my website good? Do I need video? Is my video compelling? And that's when I started getting more involved in digital video, and more specifically digital video.
Yeah, that's very cool. I was, stalking you on the internet, and basically they all are like, oh, he invented video marketing before anybody knew what it was. That's kind of like the buzzword that everybody was talking about you. So that's very cool that you kind of tapped into that. And that's, what is it? It's big idea video, right?
Yeah. As a creative person, when I discovered iMovie in 1997, whenever Apple introduced that with their Mac, their iMac, I just went crazy, because I just, the fact that I could control the editing, when we had our agency, Robert, a lot of our clients did TV. So I was a creative director, and we hired production companies that would actually shoot the commercial. Wow. And then in the post-production, I'd be sitting with the editor, helping him decide on how to edit the thing. And I would say, no, shave off a half a second here. Can you do a dissolve there, and all this stuff? And I often wished that I just knew how to work the controls, because it was easier for me. If I had the controls, I felt it would be easier for me to just do what I wanted done, right, versus try to communicate that to someone who was controng the editing process. So
get what's out of your head into real life.
Yeah. So when I had the ability to do that on my desktop with iMovie, I just had a blast.
Right.
And I started making, like a lot of people, making family videos. And then once I realized that I had the ability to do a lot of this stuff, then I started offering that to a lot of my clients. And I was enjoying it so much where, I would meet people at networking events, Robert, and they'd say, well, what do you do? When you say you're a marketing person, that can mean anything. That can mean 37 different things, because there's 37 different flavors of marketing. As you know, it can mean anything. So, occasionally they'd want to continue talking, but half the time they would say, oh, that's nice. Listen, I got to go get a drink. And they'd walk off to the bar, right?
Yeah.
So when I started getting more involved with digital video and realized that at that time, and this was, in the early 2000s, everyone had a website, but more than half the people I spoke to didn't have video on their website. And if they did have video, it really sucked. So because I was so good at it, and I had been creating it for several years, I said, well, I should create a business model around this. So when people ask me what I do, I could say I'm a marketing guy, I offer marketing consulting, which I did. But I found that when I responded by saying I create kick-ass marketing videos for small businesses, their eyebrows went up and they said, oh, really? Well, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. So that was kind of so it was out of some qualitative research that I was doing at these, just by finding myself at these networking events, and judging the fact that video became a hot thing, especially, when the internet became more high speed and people realized they had to be more competitive by offering videos that got people excited about what their product or service was. So at that point, it was 2013 when I created Big Idea Video. And at the time, the rage was something called explainer videos. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. It's like the little
right. So
characters, and they got all advanced now. But
yeah. So for listeners who don't know what that is, back then, explainer videos were, as the name explains, videos that explain things. And this was for, it worked particularly well because a lot of people had businesses that were in the B2B space that required some explaining. If you're Coke or McDonald's, or, you sell milk or something like that, you don't have to explain a whole lot about what it is. But I'd say about 70% of the time, the business owners that I was talking to had products or services that really did require a bit of explaining. Yeah. And these explainer videos did that particularly well because they often used very simple animations or graphics. Maybe your listeners are familiar with the whiteboard graphics, where it looks like someone is writing on a whiteboard. And that all that is software. You can get a piece of software that allows you to do that. So I was learning these software programs that enabled me to do these explainer videos for my clients. And it's not just the software, it's really what is the thinking behind the software? What is the idea? What are the words? What's the message that you're communicating? Because my training was in advertising and I was trained to communicate in 30 seconds or 60 seconds. Once I learned the software and learned how to do the technical side, I really had an advantage over a lot of people that really weren't trained and think in 30 seconds and communicating an exciting, compelling message in that amount of time. So that business really took off when I started it in 2013.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. It's like, so you mentioned you went to these networking events and you found that people were more interested if you specifically kind of found your niche, right? Which was explainer videos, or you make badass videos for businesses. And like, that was like cutting edge. So that was like essentially your road to success, is like you found your power offer, in a sense of like, this is what I tell people, this gets business people paying attention to my marketing, because as a marketer, everybody and their freaking nephew with a cell phone now can be a social media marketer, right? Or like a social, whatever the heck it is.
Of course.
You got to stand out. And you found that these explainer videos really took it to the next level. And I liked what you said at the beginning of all this. It's all about, clearly saying your message mixed with, potentially your creativity, right? Your the image you have in your mind and like getting people's attention.
Well, let me just backtrack just one moment, if I may, Robert. Back in 2012, 2013, because it was new, the whole shiny object syndrome, right? People gravitate to the shiny object, and for good reason, because it's different, it's cool, it's relevant. Yeah. And back then, explainer videos seemed to touch on, hit a nerve, that a marketing need that was necessary at that time. But
ooh, I like that.
After a year or two, as you just suggested with video, it became not such a new thing. So, there was kind of a window of 6 months or a year where all I needed to mention was I do explainer videos and people would want to know more. Mm-hmm. And then it became a question, okay, well, what do you charge? And it became a commodity, because we're talking to 5 other people that did explainer videos, and it became, well, who's the cheapest? So it's like anything, you're never going to win on price, and I never want to be the cheapest guy,
right?
Because I don't think that's a good business model. For some people it might be, but for me it's not. Mm-hmm. And again, the difference that I was talking about is anyone could do an explainer video, I suppose, if they learn the software, but do they have the experience and training to communicate the message using that explainer video format? And a lot of the people that were doing explainer videos were, 20-year-old kids that knew the software, but didn't have the training in marketing and communication, or have the writing skills, the design skills, or the training that I had being in the business of advertising and marketing, and knowing how to do a compelling message in a very short period of time.
Right.
And I would just say, well, listen, you can pick whoever you want. Look at my examples of my work and look at their examples, and pick whoever you think does the best work. I would live and die by the work that I created, because I felt that no one did a better job creatively communicating a message for their product or service. So back to your question, which was, repeat the question just so I get it right.
I know how to make an explainer video, but I think you've made a zillion of them, right? And it's more of a philosophical question, I guess. It's like, do you think that empathy is the key to selling more? That's kind of what Gary Vee says, and a lot of people, but it's like your ability to be creative, right? And then see what the customer would be seeing when they watch your video. Is that helpful for you, or how do you go about?
The reason I answered your question at the introduction of this podcast the way I did by reflecting on that experience in the elevator was to prove a point that I think stands true with any kind of marketing, and it applies to what you're asking me. You've got to get their attention, whether it's a TV commercial on the Super Bowl or whether it's a TikTok video on TikTok. You've got to get their attention, not in the first 15 seconds, not in the first 10 seconds, but really in the first 3 to 5 seconds in a way that's relevant to them, to your audience. Because if you don't, they're going to swipe away or they're going to click away. So that is what you asked me is kind of a general question. So I'm going to give you a general answer, but it's also a truthful answer. You've got to understand your audience, and to your point, empathy, whatever. If you're not smart enough to figure out who your audience is, and what are their pain points, what are they looking for, what's going to excite them, then you're not going to do anything. I don't care whether it's a video or any kind of other content that's going to get them to want to know more about your company or what you're offering.
I always think of curiosity as like the biggest thing for advertising. It's like not like you don't want to be too curious, but you want to like at least be able to hook them in and make them curious to take the next step in your funnel. And that's kind of one way. I'm sure there's tons of other ways to stand out of the marketplace, get their attention. But curiosity has been kind of the one that I've been looking at.
Well, let me say this, Robert. This applied in the advertising industry and applies to anyone now doing anything. You got to remember that you're talking to people who have emotions, and the way you're going to touch that person is not necessarily by sharing information and facts. I'm not saying you shouldn't share information and facts, but if that's all you're sharing, that enough is not going to work. You've got to present that in a way that touches on an emotion of that person who's listening to that, right? You've got to kind of touch their heart, touch their funny bones sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't connect with them on an emotional level, somehow it almost doesn't matter what you're saying. And here's the other thing I'll say, and this is why I think my creative talents and abilities have helped me be successful, because someone, and I'm not sure exactly who I should credit for this quote, but it wasn't me. They said that creativity is the last legal means of having an unfair advantage over your competition. And I love that quote because I think it's true. And it's not just, a lot of people don't understand what creativity is. They'll say, oh, I'll just pick a really bright color, or I'll show like a half naked person, or I'll do something bizarre, just to get attention. Well, just to grab attention is not necessarily being creative. It's got to be disciplined creativity. And that goes back to what I was saying before. It's got to be disciplined in a way that it's focused enough to speak to the audience that you're trying to engage with.
Can you give me another example of what disciplined creativity kind of means? Or just because I love creativity, right? I consider myself one of the more creative people in the world, if that's too big, but I've made tons of art, and, disciplined creativity is very cool. So I think it's like, who was it? Stephen King, he would wake up every morning at 9 and start writing. And he's like, the muse would show up some days, and then other days it wouldn't, but I would be there every single day. And that was his, disciplined creativity. When you come to advertising and when you're really trying to get into people's mind and get them to, take the next step, or at least learn more about your business, or see who you are.
Right.
There's an art to it,
So yeah, there is. I'll give you an example. So like I said, I've been doing this a long time, and I was in advertising in the 90s, which was, okay for the 90s. It was, fine for the 80s. It was okay for the 90s. But as, the 90s became the late 90s, it was becoming like less of a sexy thing to be a way to introduce yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So that's when I realized that I had to reevaluate my business model, because most of the people that I was coming across didn't necessarily want or need advertising. They all needed marketing. But when you say advertising, they think of traditional, again, this was the late 90s. So they think of what traditional advertising was at the time, which was paid media.
Right.
So I had to reevaluate my business model. And the other thing I found out, Robert, was a lot of them were really totally confused by the changing media landscape that was shifting from a traditional model to a digital model. They didn't know how to deal with it. They were used to the traditional model, but they really had a lot of questions. And when I went to these networking events, I just found that when they learned that I was a marketing guy and I was involved with video, I'd be surrounded by these guys who just wanted to pick my brain, the way you're doing at these networking events, because things were changing so quick. None of them were marketing experts. These were business owners. Maybe they knew a little bit about marketing, but they certainly weren't experts at it. So they just started surrounding me with all these questions. And at that point, I realized that maybe I should, and this was about the time when Skype became a thing. Remember Skype? I think Skype is still around, but
yeah,
Skype was Zoom before Zoom. And so it gave you the ability through voice over IP, I think they call it, where you could do what you and I are doing through the internet, cheaply through anywhere place in the US and the world. So I decided that if I kind of built a business model where I could provide marketing consulting for these business owners, not just the ones that I met at networking events in New York, all the business owners around the country, that maybe I could build a business model around that. And the last thing I wanted to do was call myself Follis Marketing Consulting. That's the last thing I wanted to name my business, because I felt like that was pretty boring, right? So, back to your question about how do you apply discipline creativity. Now, what I realized is that when I was talking to some of these business owners that were freaked out by the way things were changing with the digital landscape, half the time that I talked to these guys, I felt more like a therapist than a marketing consultant, because this was their business. They were like really freaking out about what to do. They felt like, what they were doing wasn't enough, and they didn't totally understand a lot of the bells and the whistles that was happening. So I finally came up with a name for my consulting that I thought at the very least would raise a couple of eyebrows. So I called it Follis Marketing Therapy. I did it because, again, it was a direct result of talking to some of these business owners that, it was very therapeutic for them to have a discussion with someone who knew more than they did about this stuff. So that's what I was one of the first people, I believe, to do an online consulting through Skype back in 2004. So that was pre-Big Idea Video. I just added to that in 2013. So I'm still doing both today.
Oh, cool. I was going to ask you that because I saw it was like you've been podcasting for like 7 years, right? That's the marketing therapy.
Yeah. Just because I'm old doesn't mean that I don't pay attention to, what's going on. So, just for example, when websites became a thing, my first agency website went up in 96. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, I started doing this online consulting model in 2004 via Skype. When I heard about podcasting in 2005, I said, that's cool. I want to get one of those. Yeah. So I had the marketing show with John Follis in early 2006 and did that for 7 years. I had my blog went up in 2008, yada, yada, yada.
Do you think being in New York really kind of helped you stay up to date with what was working and what was happening? It kind of seems like you had your pulse on what was happening.
I have to say, New York, pretty cutting edge.
Yeah.
Because you'd go, Gary V would be, speaking at the Sheraton Hilton right up the street. I would just, hop on my bicycle and ride up to the Sheraton and awesome. Get to hear people like Gary V. Just to give you an example. And who Gary V is, but the point is that I think not that you can't be smart and talented and live in, Oklahoma City, but New York City, I think, tends to attract some of the best people, which is why I wanted to work there. Yeah, it's not an easy place to do business, but the best and brightest go there for a reason.
Right.
Well, I think to answer your question, yeah, probably.
Yeah, because it seems like you've done a lot of really great things. What out of all of the, I guess the adventures and advertising and businesses that you've done, what was the most fun for you?
I think all of it had an element of fun because for me, being creative is fun. That's the most fun thing for me. If a week goes by and I feel like I can't exercise my creative muscles, somehow, even if it's picking up my guitar and playing some music, I get really cranky. So and that's just because it's part of my DNA. So anytime that I can apply, and the fact that I can apply my creativity to a business model that helps people, to me is the best of both worlds, because I love, as an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur for over 25 years. I can empathize, back to your point about empathy. I empathize with other business owners and entrepreneurs. I like them. I can feel their pain. I love helping them. So if I can help solve their problems, with not just my knowledge and experience, but also my creativity, to me, that's a lot of fun.
I like that. I'm going to put you a little on the spot. If you were going to do an advertising business today or a marketing business, how would you stand out? What after out of all the things you've learned in your life, like what are some key things that have driven to your success that if someone was starting today as a advertising marketer, in the genre, what do you think would help them stand out in the marketplace?
Brilliant, relevant work. Really, it's not just quantity of content. It's also quality.
I like that so much, man. That's really
it's a very simple concept, but if you put out a lot of stuff and it's mediocre, that's really not going to get people very excited. And if you put out great work, but you don't put out a lot of it, that's not going to enable you to be successful either, So it's really a combination of those two things, in a simple way to answer your question, I think.
No, it's accurate, because like the problem with nowadays is people just want everything so fast. Nobody's really putting in the work to make brilliant work anymore. And like the brilliant work, though, takes too long. So then, personally, I got ADHD, so like who has time to make a masterpiece right now? But all I want to do is make masterpieces. And it is interesting to think of marketing as kind of art, in a way of. Because like if you do a good job at marketing and everything is flowing correctly, it works, and it is a masterpiece.
Well, I'm going to quote you, if I may, because I checked out your content, and I really resonated with what you said when you said you got to play the long game.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard.
So the point of that is that you're right. Everyone's looking to grasp that shiny object and make money quick. And if that's what you want to do, go for it. And if you make money quick, good for you. But in my experience, I found that real success is not a get rich quick perspective.
Right.
It's really of understanding the foundations of your craft, whatever it might be. In this case, we're talking marketing and digital marketing, understanding the foundations of what works and what's going to be effective, and then taking the necessary time. It's like building a house, right? You build a house really, really quickly. The first tornado that happens or flood or something, that house is going to be badly damaged. If you take the time and you get the right architect and you build it properly with a solid foundation and a good location, and you do everything right, that house is going to last a long time. It may take a little bit longer to build, but it's going to be a better house. You're
saying basically focus on something and make brilliant work. And how did you stay focused as a creative on different projects?
Well, how did I stay focused? Listen, when you're in New York and you're looking for work and you got to pay rent, and it's expensive to live there, you can be pretty focused about finding work and getting a job. But I didn't want to take, the difference was I didn't want to take any job, and I turned down jobs that paid more money for agencies that I thought would be a better fit for me in the long run because they were better agencies, right? Yeah. The people that worked at those agencies were the top people in the industry. And because they were the better agencies, I suppose they didn't have to pay more money to get people to work there. Mm-hmm. So I opted to choose to work at the best places and learn from the best people, which was not necessarily the most money, but that was my focus, and that was just me. My goal had always been, once I decided what I wanted to do, when I decided I wanted to pursue advertising as a career, I just decided that I wanted to be the best. And listen, I was scared of New York. I'm not a New Yorker.
Yeah.
I grew up in Connecticut, and where I lived in Connecticut, we didn't have a sidewalk in the front of our house. We had woods in the back of our house. So my little area of Connecticut was pretty rural. And New York to me was like another planet. My dad, we were only a couple hours away, mm-hmm. and I would go in there for Yankee baseball games and stuff like that. But it was a scary place because it was pretty intense. It was moving, 4 times faster than where I lived. And out of college, I was not ready to move there. So I did not move there immediately after college. I started out in Atlanta, Georgia, spent a couple of years there, and then figured I needed to take things up a notch. I moved to Chicago, worked in Chicago for 3 years. And after 3 years in Chicago, I felt that I was ready to give New York City a shot.
Yeah, it's definitely a different animal, New York. Because I know you went from Madison Avenue to kind of freelancing to starting your own business. And obviously we talked about, creating brilliant work is how you stand out in the marketplace. But how did you focus between doing sales and doing the actual marketing work for your different agencies and different businesses?
Okay, so you mentioned a little bit about my career path. I began freelancing mainly because I kept getting fired. I don't know if I mentioned that to you in what my assistant submitted to you, but I got fired 4 times in the first 8 years of my career. Mm-hmm. So I may have worked for some of the top agencies, but oftentimes I did not last very long. And it wasn't necessarily because I didn't have the talent. It was because I was not good at office politics. And when you work at some of the top agencies or top companies, it doesn't necessarily have to be the advertising business, but New York is a pretty competitive place, in case you didn't know.
Right.
And you could be a smart guy and even a talented guy, but if you don't know how to maneuver through the waters of the politics, the office politics, you're probably not going to last long at any big company. And I wasn't good at it. And a couple of times the guy that hired me at these places ended up leaving within a month or two after bringing me in. And that's never a good situation when you're in somewhere where the guy who hires you is not there anymore. That did not help my situation. So I found myself oftentimes out of work, and that's when I started freelancing, mm-hmm. which turned out to be pretty good, because when you're working at freelancing at smaller agencies, oftentimes they bring you in for a couple of weeks, sometimes a couple of days, as kind of a hired gun to solve a creative problem. And you're not there long enough to even, have to deal with politics. They're just paying you oftentimes, pretty well to solve a problem. And for me, that worked out pretty well. And I started having some success as a freelancer, and that attracted the attention of a guy who was an incredible sales guy. So he turned out to be my business partner. So when I partnered with him, I didn't have to worry about sales. He was the sales guy and was amazing at it.
Yeah.
And that's how we became so successful so quickly, because I was very talented on the creative side. He was an amazing sales guy. And within 4 years, we became one of the most successful and award-winning agencies, not just in New York, but around the country. So I didn't have to worry about that, Robert, until I walked away from that partnership in the early 90s, because I wanted to get more involved with digital marketing. And they kind of wanted to stay in the traditional, follow the traditional path. And I could see what was happening with the internet. Just decided that I would be better on my own. But at that point, I did have to wear a sales hat as well, which
Mm.
was a challenge to be good at both, you know?
Yeah.
And I would never claim to be as good on the sales side as I was on the creative side, but I was good enough. And in big part, I think that was because I spent a few years working with one of the guys who I felt was one of the best sales guys I'd ever met.
Do you have any advice on picking business partners or anything like that? Like finding a good one? Because it's hard, man. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like, picking a spouse. I think it's, you gotta date them for a while. And, what was crazy about my partnership is that 20 minutes after I met this guy for a beer, he looked at my work samples, because as a creative person, you have a portfolio. Back then you had a portfolio. So I shared, first of all, he was referred to me. So he called me, he knew about me. I didn't know anything about him. So I was already highly referred to him. And then that was reinforced by the work I shared. And 20 minutes into our conversation at a bar, he looks at me and says, well, I think we should start an ad agency. To which I replied, I'm sorry, what? And what's your name again? Because I had nothing to judge him on. So you really have to, the best way to do that, as with dating, is you have to take your time and get to know someone. But
Yeah.
he was so good at picking up business that, within a few weeks, we were picking up clients.
Mm.
So we had an agency before I really even got to know him that well. Now that's unusual.
Right.
That's really, really unusual.
The stars aligned, it's cool.
But on one hand, it was really exciting, but on another hand, it was like riding a roller coaster, because he was a bit of a loose cannon, shall we say, and he was so aggressive. In some cases, I felt like he was even too aggressive. And my first reaction was, I'm just glad this guy's on my side, until I realized he actually wasn't.
Yeah. Man, you've dropped a lot of gems. I kind of want to just touch back on creating brilliant work. What does that look like in your mind when you're thinking of brilliant work as an advertiser? Just if you have any insight on that kind of.
Well, there's two litmus tests for brilliant work.
Mm-hmm.
One is it award winning? In the advertising business, unlike, the insurance industry or the food industry or pretty much every other industry other than the music industry and Hollywood, we actually give out awards in the advertising industry. They call it Clio Awards. And if you could see behind me on
I was looking at those. Yeah, those are
my
cool.
mantle, I happen to have won a few of them. So anyway, that's one litmus test, but, perhaps the bigger litmus test is how effective it is, right?
Right. Obviously.
How much it gets results for your clients. So as proud as I am with all the creative awards I've won, I think I'm as proud or more proud by the fact that I have a lot of testimonials from the clients that I've worked with. And, more than that, one of the campaigns I helped create for a client became a Harvard business case study. And if you know anything about that, the Harvard business case studies only does case studies on examples that are exceptional.
Wow.
They get taught at the Harvard Business School. So to have one that is still being taught at the Harvard Business School because it was so successful is not something that many people can claim.
No.
I also can claim that Prentice Hall puts out marketing books that are taught at universities around the country. And another one of my campaigns was featured in a Prentice Hall marketing book called Principles of Marketing that came out 20 years ago. So I don't know if it's still in the reprinted editions. I don't know if they kept that in there, but it certainly was in there for a few years. So, those are I use as a litmus test, in addition to the testimonials that I received from my clients, and I'm really proud of.
That's awesome. That is a good thing to look back on and see all these things that you've accomplished in a career that is not easy. It's not easy to be a successful advertiser, let alone get a bunch of awards or be in a Harvard business book, man. That's pretty awesome. How did you think you learned the most that made you some of these campaigns so successful? Was it just your understanding of human nature? Was it your willingness to kind of explore and try new things and not be afraid of it? What do you think?
It was a combination of things, and any person who is going to attempt to create some kind of a creative marketing message for their client needs to begin by doing their homework. So I was always big on learning as much as I could about the client's product and service, product or service, and understanding the market that they were going after as well as I possibly could. So sometimes, that would mean, in the case of the campaign that became a Harvard Business case study, we went to visit the client's company and got a tour of their manufacturing plant by the president of the company. So we spent the day there with him, getting a guided tour and learn, because before we did that, we didn't know much. The guy made jam. He competed with Smucker's jam. So he was making an all fruit product. This was a long time ago when all fruit was a new thing, and I didn't know anything about jam and jelly. I didn't know there was a difference in all this stuff and how it was made. And he said, well, did you know that in the average jar of Smucker's jam, it's only 8% fruit? And I said, you're kidding me. I said, what's the rest of it? He said, refined sugar and corn syrup. I said, you're shitting me. He said, no, our jam is 100% fruit and fruit juice and nothing else. So, you can learn a lot. So it starts with doing your due diligence about that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it's don't settle for what you're going to present. Just because you think about it, and maybe in the first hour or two, you come up with an idea that you think is brilliant. Chances are it's not brilliant, whatever I always gave it the do I respect it in the morning test. Now, you probably know what that means, but for, some people in your audience that may not, is you have to give it some time. You know, absolutely. Sometimes the first idea you come up with, you think it's brilliant, but sometimes you need to give it some time and look at it the next day and see if you still love it. And, occasionally I did, but more often than not, I thought it could be better. And just always believe that it can be better. At a certain point, you have a deadline, right, where you've got to show something to the client. But right up into the deadline, I would be working as hard as I could be, sometimes, 15 hours a day, just because I would not settle. I wanted to be as good as it could be because I wanted to hit a home run. Yeah. I didn't want to double. I didn't want to triple. I wanted a home run and a grand slam if I could get one. Yeah, and you got a couple. And that was the attitude. And listen, sometimes you can try to get a grand slam, and you might only get a double out of it. Yeah. I won't say that everything I did was a grand slam, but that's what I shot for. I tried to swing for the fences every time. Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Do you have any? I mean, I have a love for copywriting. I'm just wondering if you have any tips on copywriting, or if you have like a method, or anything, insight on maybe getting better. Well, I could tell because I was impressed by your copy. I mean, I love when you, what a lot of copy doesn't do is what you do with your copy. And that's, talk to someone like you're talking to a real person. Yeah. Don't talk to write it so you're like talking to your market. Write it as if you're talking to a friend of yours, right? Yeah. It's hard though, but I like it. Be real. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's what we were just talking about. it takes some training. Not everyone is a good writer. Yeah. But it takes training, it takes discipline. And again, just like anything I do, I love writing. I have a passion for it. So, for me, writing is just editing. It's just editing and editing and editing and editing, because the first draft is never what I end up with. It's like a sculpture. Well, I'll create something, and then, I'll come back to it an hour later and take off a little bit here, add a little bit more there, and keep molding and shaping it until, I think it's finished. And it's hard to say it's ever finished, because as you can probably empathize, is that you could always tweak it a little bit there and change it a little bit there, But any kind of creativity, whether it's anything, the things that I just said earlier still apply. You have to know who you're talking to, and there's, listen, there's a fair amount of talent. I'd be lying if I didn't say that it does involve a level of talent. Not everyone has the talent. Some of that can be developed with hard work and training and studying and learning from the best people. But I think just some people have a little bit more talent at it than other people.
It's just something you got to work at. Like writing is not my skill, but I got the itch for copywriting, and I try and make it a daily habit now. And that's the only reason I've gotten better and better and better at it. And hopefully I'll be a badass copywriter one of these days.
And so, listen, some people are good writers, but they're not good copywriters.
Right? It's different.
Brilliant writings, but when you're writing to sell or promote a product or service, it's a different kind of writing. You got to be able to, going back to what I said earlier, captivate people quickly. Right. You've got to keep them engaged, and don't say one word more than what you need to say. Mm-hmm. There's a skill in keeping things short and brief. There's a real talent for that I think a lot of great writers, they're verbose.
Yeah.
They're really good at writing, but they don't know how to write in a concise marketing perspective, right?
Actually gets something done or a result. So what are you doing these days? What are you still coaching people, or are you...
Well, I've been doing a lot of these podcasts, Robert, and initially it wasn't to be talking about what you and I are talking about. I had made a documentary a while back, and I initially started doing this a few months ago to try to talk more about the documentary and get more people interested in that. But after doing about a dozen of them, I got kind of bored hearing myself talk about that. And I started getting on more podcasts talking about my other passion, which is what you and I are talking about, my career in advertising and marketing, because there are so many hosts like yourself that were interested in talking to people who were, whether it be on entrepreneurship or marketing or overcoming business challenges or any number of flavors to do with it. So I found myself getting requests to be on a number of podcasts. And as I was talking to more and more people, I'll just backtrack. I'm at the point that I always wanted to be at with my life and my career, which is to be able to do what I want to do, do what I love. And one of the things I love doing is doing this. I love sharing my experience and passion and helping people. I've done a lot of volunteer work over my career, but a lot of people were telling me, John, man, you are a smart dude. You ought to, go back, keep doing this. There are a lot of people that could really benefit from what you have to say. And even though I don't need to do it, I've been really, the last couple of months, or I should say couple of weeks, I've been thinking, well, what the hell, if there are people out there that could really benefit from what I have to say, I don't mind doing these podcasts, but if they want to work with me one-on-one with marketing therapy and pay me, I help them and I enjoy doing it, and it's a win-win thing. Why not do that? So I've been slowly kind of breathing more life back into my Follis marketing therapy on LinkedIn mainly. I haven't really been pushing it hard. And, right now I have the luxury of working with whoever I want to work with. So, I could kind of pick and choose who I want to work with. And some people I can tell in a few minutes of talking to them that we might not be a good fit. And if I don't think it would be a mutual benefit or someone I would enjoy helping, I would just, respectfully say, listen, I think there might be someone else better for you to work with, So anyway, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm going back to doing that. I think just because I enjoy doing it.
I like it. I love the title marketing therapy. That's just so funny because I do so many strategy calls and so much of it, I'll just be like, well, how much money do you want to make? And then they won't tell me a number. They'll just go off on their whole problems of all their lives. It's so much therapy. It's kind of funny. Well, that's cool, man. You're in a good place. You got a good problem to have where you can just work with whoever you want. And I mean, you have the rewards and the testimonials to show. It's an amazing career. And I'm so happy I got to connect with you. I want to respect your time, but I have two more questions I ask everybody who comes on the show. But before we get into those, if people want to get in contact with you, what is the best way to get in contact or get into your world? Is it LinkedIn or what is the best ways?
Well, my website is follisinc.com. And if you go there, you'll come to a fork in the road where you could go to my big idea video, or you could go to marketing therapy. So depending on what you're interested in, or if you're interested in both, you could look at both. But that's probably the simplest way. So it's Follis, FOLLISINC.com. That would probably be the easiest way, but I've got a lot of content. I've got, I think, 5 YouTube channels at this point.
Oh, wow.
So if you plug my name into YouTube, you're going to get something, probably a lot of stuff. Big idea video, you could also plug in there. You could just plug my name or any of the stuff into Google. So any number of ways you can find out about me.
Cool. Actually, I got one more question. Sorry. For your advertising, did you ever like niche down, or were you just basically you understood marketing and everything for so many different kind of businesses, you were able to help everybody? Or I'm just curious.
Well, the only areas where I would say, I first of all, the short answer is no, I didn't niche down, because I love working with all flavors of business owners. And but where I did niche, Robert, is when they said, listen, I really got to, work on my AdWords, or I really got to improve my SEO.
Right.
I don't claim to be an expert in AdWords or SEO. I know about both, but that's not my expertise. So if that's something they really wanted to explore, I would either refer them to someone in my network that I felt could help them with that, or I would just encourage them to find someone else, because I know a lot about a lot of things, but I don't know a lot about everything.
Right.
So if it was an area like that I didn't feel like I knew enough about, I would just deflect it and encourage them to find someone else. But as far as, the industry or the product, I felt that my skills could work with pretty much any kind of a business owner, whether they were in business for a long time or just starting up a business, whether it was a products, nonprofit or service business. It really didn't matter.
Yeah.
Because it would start with me asking them a lot of questions,
Yeah. Like you said, you got in the trenches and you really understood their market, so you could work with everybody. I was just curious, because everybody says you should have a niche and this and that, but
of course. And I understand that. And, I understand the logic behind that. And I don't challenge that thinking either,
Yeah.
It's just that I don't have a niche. I don't really want to have a niche. I don't want to specialize in like the hospitality industry. Part of it is, Robert, because over the years, I have worked with probably 300 different products and services. So there's actually very few industries that I haven't had some kind of experience with.
That's cool.
And you don't need, the thing is, when, before I worked with this guy who was in the jam industry, we didn't have any experience in the jam industry. This was a Harvard business case. Yeah. We knew nothing about all fruit jam and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I don't think you need to specialize in an industry to be able to help someone market their services. If you just, are willing to put in the time and energy to understand everything you need to about their industry and their target audience as well.
Well, that's nice to hear. Well, you've had an awesome career, and I've had a really good time talking with you, man. So I got these last 2 questions I ask everybody that comes on the show. So the first one is, what motivates you? What really gets you going?
I think I said it earlier. I enjoy working with other people and helping other people, especially other entrepreneurs and business owners, because I've been one for so long. So I have an empathy for them, and that gets me excited. I nothing gets me more excited than to have worked with someone for a period of time with my marketing therapy, and then have them write me a kick-ass testimonial because I've really helped them. To me, again, I love winning those shiny objects. But what I think I like more is just knowing that I helped someone that I really like. I try to work with clients that I enjoy working with, and I get to know them and like them as people. So I think for me, that's an added motivation that gives me a very enjoyable experience when I'm able to help them.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, you have a skill where you can move the needle and get results. So why not? And then the last question, the key thing is kind of impact, but has there been a habit that has genuinely made an impact for like in your life that is like, you can see like, hey, as soon as I started doing this, like every day or something like that, like it moved the needle or it helped me get results?
I know what you're talking about. I would just say for me, it's just been to have a clear focus and a
Yeah.
clear goal and be determined about that.
Cool.
And that doesn't mean that that your goal or your focus can't change. In fact, I think it's actually wise if you're able to realize at a certain point it does need to change. For example, when I was finding it challenging to be successful in the corporate world, initially my goal was to work at the best agencies in New York. But when I had problems realizing how political they were, I had to kind of shift my focus a little bit and decide that maybe I shouldn't continue trying to get a job at these big agencies. I'd worked at several of them, but at that point I had to change my focus and my goal and try something different. So I think it's just, again, having a goal and being focused enough to do what you need to do to achieve that goal.
Right. Determined and just getting it done.
I know some people say, well, I make my bed every day and I do 4 push-ups before I run a mile before I, have breakfast and all that. And listen, whatever works for you. For me, it's a little bit more simple than that.
No, it's always cool. I like that. Ask these questions because I get all kinds of different answers, so it just depends. And everybody has their own road to success. You've lived a very cool, successful life, man. So thank you so much for sharing with everybody. Do you have any last thoughts before we kind of wrap it up?
Well, I don't know that we touched on this, but I've always, very early in my career, I realized that if I could apply my skills toward public service causes, it's great to be able to sell corn chips and ding dongs and hamburgers and, fish sticks and all that stuff. But if you can use your creative advertising and marketing skills toward making the world a better place through various public service causes, to me, that's something not to ignore. So very early in my career, I always tried to make time on the side to get involved with various causes, and I probably have worked on, at this point, over three dozen nonprofit causes.
Wow.
One of which was child abuse. And I have to say that one of the biggest thrills of my career was working on a national TV campaign with the NBA. The NBA was actually paying for the TV time. So these TV spots ran during NBA playoff games for child abuse awareness. And about a month after the campaign ran, we heard from the vice commissioner that this was the most successful public service thing that the NBA had ever done up to that point. They were just getting all kinds of great feedback. And a couple of weeks after I got that from the VP at the NBA, I got something in the mail that I thought was a joke because the return address on it was the White House.
Whoa.
And I opened it up and it was an invitation from the First Lady to a White House reception where they were honoring people around the country who had been involved in what they had determined significant public service efforts. So I was one of a couple of dozen people that was honored as a result of this campaign that I was involved with to be honored at a White House reception. So that was pretty cool.
That's incredible. So you took your skills of advertising to nonprofits after. That's so incredible. So
No. This was actually very early in my career where I started in my 20s. I started doing it. So
that's even cooler.
I just realized I'd love to, work on Coke, work at the agency on Coke, but am I really making the world a better place by getting people to drink more Coke? So that's to help balance that question in my own mind. I said, well, I don't know if I'm really making the world a better place by selling more Coke to people, but I know I'm making the world a better place by increasing awareness about child abuse, so or drunk driving or whatever it might be. So that's why very early on my career, I started getting involved with that.
That's powerful. How would you go about, like, if, because, you know, I do a lot of marketing and business coaching. If you wanted to do something like that, what would you do? You would find a cause that you really get in alignment with and see if you can do their marketing for them or something like that?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, in the case of the child abuse thing, I had come up with an ad on my own when people did ads, and showed it to my business partner at the time. And he thought it was a pretty amazing ad and said, we've got to find a child abuse organization that might consider running this. So it's kind of an ass backwards way of doing things. Usually you don't do the advertising before you have the client.
That's what, I get, if you're creative, that's what you do sometimes.
But in this case, you know, again, the ad hit me and I just came up with it. And my business partner was a kick-ass salesperson, just went crazy over it and said, we have to, you know, find someone. And that's how that happened. But normally it doesn't work that way. Normally there's any number of ways of finding. Sometimes there are channels you can go through where you could find the resources, where you could find where there are nonprofits that are looking for marketing services or marketing professionals to help them. Yeah. There are a number of volunteer organizations that are kind of like matchmakers, where they already have a number of nonprofits, and their job is to kind of match people to the nonprofits. One of them is called Taproot, but there's all Taproot, it's called. But there's other ones online where, again, there's services where they match people to do that stuff. But or you could just do it on your own. I've tried it on my own as well. Just find organizations and reach out. It's a little bit harder when you do it out of the blue because they're always suspicious. The person you're talking to is like someone who is often not the decision maker, and they really want to know what it is you're selling.
Yeah.
So they always kind of take that call with a very cynical attitude. So I've found, even though I've tried to do that, I found that I've often gotten less than interested responses from the people who answer my phone calls or emails when I attempt to do that. But it's not impossible.
Yeah, well, you planted a little seed in the back of my mind. I can use my marketing for good in the world instead of just selling Coke, like you said. That's a very cool use of your skills, I guess, if that's the right way to put it. But that's cool, man. I stole Steve Jobs' line, because when he was trying to get John Scully to come on to Apple in, I guess it was like 1979, a few years after Steve and Steve Wozniak co-founded Apple, they realized that to grow their business, they needed a really brilliant marketing guy. And they had their eye on John Scully, who at the time was the marketing director for Coke. And I don't know if you know this story, but John Scully was kind of ambivalent because he had a pretty sweet gig as the marketing director for Coke worldwide. And at the time, Apple was just this tech startup that was intriguing, but certainly not a Coke. Right.
So he was kind of leaning against joining Apple, and Steve Jobs finally met him and said, "Listen, John, let me ask you this: do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water to the masses, or do you want to work for a tech startup that's going to change the world?"
Boom.
And boom is exactly what happened. And John Scully admits that when Steve Jobs phrased it to him just like that, he really felt like he had no choice but to take a shot and leave Coke and work for Apple.
Awesome. Well, I think that was a great episode, man. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing time with my audience and just dropping all the wisdom, man. I learned a lot. I'm going to go help nonprofits now, maybe just change the world. You never know.
Great. Go for it, man.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. And you asked some great questions. So thanks. Good luck with your podcast. Seems like you're having a lot of fun with it and a lot of success with it. So I can tell you've been doing this a while and continued success with it. I think, what you're doing is in a way a public service, because you're offering these things to people out there who, hopefully can really benefit from some of the guests you've had on.
Yeah, that's the goal. Help people. Well, I think that's the episode. So everybody, in the show notes below, we'll have all the links if you want to contact John. And then he also said on LinkedIn, you're pretty active on LinkedIn. Is that another social medium?
Yep.
Or
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, check those out. Everybody have a good rest of your day. Give me a like, a subscribe, put some comments down below, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.